Oh, hello. Welcome back to Dog Ear Thoughts. I'm Michael. So glad you're here. Episode 11. It's been it's a great journey. I'm excited to be here. I've upgraded some of my audio, so hopefully I'm coming in clearer, and looking forward to getting into this week with you. So I'm taking a different tact away from a little bit of fantasy. This one's going to be some horror, some ghost stories. So hope you're excited about that. The book itself is called Ghost Eaters. It's by Clay McLeod Chapman, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into this one. It's has a great tone. I think the way I explained it in my Goodreads summary was that it's Sixth Sense, Talk to Me, and The Last of Us all roped into a really tight story, right around 300 pages. I'm excited to talk about it. I think it speaks to some great themes about addiction, loss, grief, just how do you handle and kind of approach uh, when things are hard and you go through a lot of a loss. And then on top of that, it's really set in an interesting place, Richmond, Virginia, which you normally may not think of as an interesting place, but the location in this story is almost its own character and speaks a lot to that. And I'm excited to get into it and talk more about it. So looking forward to it, and so glad you're here. Go ahead and love to hear some more of what you think about this book in the comments. Like, subscribe, all of those great things. And I look forward to jumping into this with you. So let's get started. All right, so getting into the story, and before we jump into the book, I'm going to talk a little bit about um, Clay McLeod Chapman, and a little bit about just a little bit of background. He's been a writer. He's written different books, screenwriter, comic books, even children's books author, and he, as you would imagine, given the fact that the story is based in Richmond, he was born and raised there. So part of using Richmond as a location kind of speaks to his experience and pieces into that. Eaters came out in 2022, which is not that long ago, but yet he also had some interesting background in terms of how he came about creating stories. And one of the things that he did as he came out of high school and beyond was he actually created kind of a one person storytelling performance called the Pumpkin Pie Show. And he really used some music. A lot of his friends were in punk bands and things like that. He couldn't necessarily wasn't musically inclined, but he loved the energy and wanted to kind of replicate that in a way where it was a one person show, really digging into kind of using that energy and bringing people on from music, but also really putting some theatrical performance into that, monologues, all of those stories, which really also bridged into being able to tell, as with a lot of oral traditions, being able to tell good ghost stories as part of that, or just in general, being able to narrate things in the first person present tense and sometimes too. And that really speaks to the main protagonist in this story, whose view you get this story from in Ghost Eaters, is in first person present tense. You have some thought flashbacks, but most of it is focused on what the main character Aaron is kind of experiencing in real time. So all of that is kind of bigging into that, and really the other piece to it is, as I said, he uses Richmond as kind of a location's point of view, and a lot of people, I think, who are not familiar with Richmond may not feel like Richmond is a haunted place or anything like that, but really it has a lot of think of it as like Savannah, Georgia, who has a lot of ghost stories and ghost tours and things like that. But also, Richmond does as well. And you really think about it as there were a lot of people who died between the Revolutionary War, the Civil War significantly had a lot of that. You had a lot of um, deaths of people there who were enslaved. You also bring about just in general the amount of history that from the beginning of landing of this country, or this the North American continent all the way into from you had people who natives who were died and were killed in this as they were pushed off their land, and then all the way up until recent times. And so there's a lot of if you're going to tell a ghost story, this is a great place for it, because it is absolutely a city that is built on kind of living in the past, but also moving to the future. And as this book is set in somewhat present day, there was a lot that was going on in Richmond, right around COVID and into the early 2020s, where monuments were being torn down. There was a lot of change. There's a lot of art that is put into this place, and this book speaks about the art and murals and things that go along with that. So it really brings about a kind of a great place for this to kind of move into a ghost, or having ghosts of the past as well as ghosts of the not so past kind of bring into this place. And Richmond is a great place for that. And so that brings about and kind of has this undertone, and like I said, is its own character within this book. And then I think on top of that, just the general sense of a person being haunted, or being haunted by something. When we talk about ghost stories, and you think often of a haunted house or a poltergeist or something where it's kind of a static location, whereas you may also look at haunted in a different way, and really we think about people who are described as looking haunted or having a haunted look about them. A lot of that goes to trauma or past events, or it's not always necessarily being stuck in a house, but that haunting or that trauma follows you wherever you go, and in some cases continues to follow you. And so think about ourselves or the bodies as being haunted as opposed to a house being haunted. Kind of reframes the hauntedness in that regard, or haunted people from haunted locations. And while part of this story does take place in a house, it is not necessarily a house. The house itself doesn't necessarily own or have a history to it. It is the people and what they bring into the house, or other locations that kind of bring about that. So this in and of itself is really a great setup and a great background into where this book comes and where this book grows from, and takes a different step into it. So really exciting from that standpoint. So let's dig into the book itself. So the book is set in Richmond. The main protagonist is a character, Erin Hill. She's out of college, early 20s, maybe to mid 20s, and she's still, she hasn't quite found her way in life, which is very normal for people kind of getting out of college, trying to land the right job. In fact, quite frankly, her parents look down on her in terms of like the paths that she's chosen in terms of her work. She's very much kind of pulled into the kind of an artistry standpoint. Her parents would much rather her get sucked into kind of something more practical, something that that they would view both as a socially more acceptable type of work. And she's also still tied to kind of her three other closest friends within this book. The main ringleader of kind of four of them as they had navigated college and now beyond, is called Silas. And they dated for a little bit in college, which you learn more about as you go in. And then within the last few months leading up to the beginning of this book, Silas had been in and out of rehab, really struggling. In fact, she's, Erin would constantly kind of say like she's trying to separate herself from Silas. But as soon as, if he ever reaches out, she drops everything in order to be there for him. And as the book opens up, that's exactly what happens. He reaches out and needs her to pick him up, and basically he needs to escape from rehab again. And when she picks him up, he is kind of worse than she'd ever seen him. In fact, to the point where he basically just gets out of the car mid road and just disappears. And she's obviously constantly worried about him. The other people in this world is Tobias, so another friend in the group. someone who is kind of initially seen as kind of just in the background. He obviously is very supportive of anything Silas wants to do. He is also pulled into kind of the thrall of Silas's personality and everything that goes about that. And obviously has some strong feelings about Aaron as well, but Aaron is not reciprocating any of that at all. And then you have Amara, who is kind of the more grounded of all four of them, or more skeptical. She's also, she is seemingly more successful in this adult life that they are in terms of finding a better job, potentially moving out of Richmond and kind of escaping and things like that. So all of that sets the very ground rules of where we're going. And early in, and this is part of the blurb, is that days after Aaron helps Silas escape rehab, he's found dead of an overdose. And that's what kind of kicks off a lot of things in terms of this loss and this huge guilt that Aaron kind of pulls as and follows with her in terms of, did she not do enough to help him and bring him out of this? But then on top of that, also this constant set of like, she didn't get to say goodbye. But then things kind of turn a little bit weird from that point, is that Tobias brings them together and says, hey, do you want to, Silas still has things to say. Do we want to still be able to talk to him? And he has a pill, and the pill is called Ghost, and it is supposedly allows people to commune and talk to people who have died, and lets you see the dead. And so, Aaron jumps right into it. Amara clearly is a little more skeptical, and thus begins this path for Aaron into, does she see the dead? Can she see the dead? And what does that mean? And what are the effects, both personally for her, but within her friend group, for going down this path of trying desperately to still see Silas and keep him in her life after he's gone. So, what are the themes of this book? Now, obviously, there's a very obvious theme of addiction. So, beyond the drug addiction itself, and how do you literally go from where you are to rock bottom and then back up again, and how do you escape that rock bottom, both from a Silas perspective and an Aaron's perspective. But then also, how do we often get sucked into addictive personalities, and whether you could look at that as cult leaders or just in general, people who, even close friends who have this a personality where you almost become codependent upon the relationship, and how can you, if it is not healthy, how do you escape that relationship that is dragging you down a path that you kind of become addicted to it yourself. And so that is absolutely one of those themes that go into that. There is also the overarching theme of grief and how do you, and sudden loss, and how do you move on from that, especially when there's someone who is closer to that. And grief is, it's a universal part of our lives. There is not a human in this world who will not experience grief at multiple points in time within your life, whether it is truly a loss of someone who has died, but could be loss of a friendship, loss of anything else that loss of even a pet, anything in that realm. Grief is almost a universal feeling. And how do you move on from that grief, or how do you absorb that grief and turn it into something that you can move forward with, especially when it's sudden and you don't get to have a closure with that. So that all of it fits into that. And then you throw into that, again, as I kind of talked a little bit about Richmond and the historical piece of the haunting and grief that kind of goes into that, where Um, it, there's a lot of whether it was Richmond or anywhere else in the South or other parts of this country where there's a lot of things that are built on grief and sorrow and death. Whether it's slavery, whether it's the natives who were pushed off their land and killed. Obviously, this constant set of not being able to move forward as a country or even as a location, and getting sucked into that grief as well, or loss. And does Ghost as a drug allow people to be stuck in the past and not being able to move forward as well? Not just obviously within Richmond from a historical perspective, but just as a people in general. And can we ever get past the past, and be able to move forward in a healthy way and get rid of, and adequately face the trauma and the awfulness that has occurred, and face that in the right way, and that is something that we still haven't done right as a country, or in a lot of places. So all of that really factors into it. While that's definitely an underneath piece of it, it is not a completely. It is definitely there as both a character, but also as Aaron moves through this story, the more she takes Ghost and the more what she experiences, all of that stuff becomes a very real presence in her situation. And so it is absolutely something that we need to address and kind of focus in from that guard. Now, I would say for me, as I read this book, I love this book. I read this at night. It was probably not the best idea, for reading a ghost story right before bed, but I loved it. I thought this was an amazingly fresh take on a ghost story. It had a lot of dread. It had a lot of sorrow. It had a lot of really tense moments and intense moments of for all the characters and moving forward with that. And then it also even had, obviously whether it ends in a sense of hope or is it a sense of not, like that people are still stuck in this place. It really kind of ends, I think, in a way that allows you to kind of create your own, like, what is the next step? What really happens to these characters, or Aaron specifically, as we kind of look forward into that. All right, so what are my thoughts on this book? I personally loved it. I read it at night, right before bed. Probably not the best idea for a ghost story, but I could not get enough. I was absorbed into these characters. I was pulled along with the story. It had a great amount of intensity and sorrow and what's going to happen next. I absolutely, this was a page turner. 300 pages. I think I felt it read fast, but it was incredibly well done and a really fresh take on both a ghost story in general, but also just a story about trauma, about grief, and kind of finding your way through all of that along with addiction. So absolutely, I personally recommend it. I think you should jump on into this, and especially if it's something that you like it. If you read horror, and like that, I would absolutely say that this is a great place to start with Clay McLeod Chapman. I think he's definitely found his voice in this regard. I'm sure obviously it makes me want to go back and read some of his other ones, and kind of really, I really felt like he was a great writer for this. So absolutely enjoyed it. Again, please, let me know what your thoughts are if you've read it, or in general, what's your favorite ghost story? What's a story that you loved in that regard that you would recommend from that perspective as well. So, like, subscribe. Look forward to talking to you more, and until then, take care.